The world expected another tense showdown between the US and China. Instead, what unfolded in Beijing looked more like a carefully choreographed geopolitical reset. But beneath the red carpets, military bands, grand banquets, and smiling photo ops, this summit was not really about friendship. The biggest victory may already belong to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Yes, you heard that right. Because he succeeded in bringing Donald Trump to Beijing on China's terms. For years, Washington projected China as America's greatest strategic rival. Trade wars, technology sanctions, military tensions in South China, Taiwan flashpoints, semiconductor restrictions, and accusations of economic aggression pushed US-China relations into their lowest point in decades. Yet, suddenly, the American President Donald Trump arrived in Beijing with praise for Xi Jinping, describing him as a great leader and even a friend. That visual alone sent a powerful global signal. And this is precisely where the deeper story begins, because in diplomacy, symbolism matters as much as policy. China wanted the world to see that despite years of American pressure, Washington still had to come to Beijing to negotiate. That's a smart move. Xi Jinping's government turned the summit into a showcase of Chinese confidence. Trump was welcomed with full state honors inside the Great Hall of the People, complete with ceremonial guards, gun salutes, and lavish banquets. Beijing essentially presented itself as an equal superpower, not a country isolated with Western pressure. What makes this even more significant is the timing. The summit came during the growing instability across the Middle East, especially surrounding Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Global energy markets remain nervous, shipping routes are under pressure, and Washington increasingly recognizes that China cannot simply be ignored in solving international crises. In many ways, Xi Jinping used this geopolitical movement brilliantly. Instead of appearing defensive, China positioned itself as calm, stable, and indispensable. Xi Jinping repeatedly framed China as a responsible global power that wants cooperation instead of confrontation. He even invoked the famous theory. The theory that states the idea that rising powers and established powers often slide into war. But while the public optics looked warm, the actual conversation behind closed doors were far tougher. The most explosive issue remains Taiwan. Xi Jinping directly warned Trump that mishandling Taiwan could push both countries towards a major conflict. Another major dimension of the conflict involved economics. After months of trade tensions and tariff battles, both sides appeared eager to prevent total economic decoupling. Trade negotiators from both countries had already held talks before the summit. That's an important point to notice. Trump repeatedly pushed for business agreements involving agriculture, aircraft, and manufacturing, while Xi Jinping promised broader market access for American firms. This is where China may have scored another strategic win. For years, Washington attempted to isolate Beijing economically through tariffs, export controls, and restrictions on advanced AI technologies. But now, American business leaders are themselves appearing alongside the US President Beijing. Executives linked to companies like Nvidia and Tesla were the part of broader delegations, signaling that American firms still view China as too important to be abandoned. That's how time works. And globally, that matters because much of the world is watching whether America's China containment strategy is sustainable or whether not. If Washington continues returning to the negotiating table despite years of confrontation, many countries may conclude that China's economic and geopolitical rise is now impossible to reverse. And that is why analysts argue that Xi Jinping's biggest victory is psychological and diplomatic strength. There's also domestic political anger here, and I'll tell you viewers, Trump has long cultivated the image of a leader tough on China. Yet, his visit required balancing confrontation with cooperation. He praised Xi Jinping while also trying to reassure American audiences that Washington remains strong on trade and security. That balancing act reflects a broader American dilemma. The US wants to compete with China aggressively, but it also cannot afford to ignore China. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping appears increasingly comfortable projecting China as an alternative center of global power. And perhaps that is the real takeaway from this Trump-Xi Jinping summit. This was not simply about another state visit. It was a public display, a display of a changing world order. For decades, American presidents often hosted global leaders from a position of overwhelming dominance. But now, the optics are different. Trump traveled to Beijing during a period of global uncertainty, and in Xi Jinping's eyes, getting Donald Trump to sit down in Beijing amid all the global turmoil may itself be proof that China has already achieved a strategic victory. And now, how China would emerge after this summit is yet to be seen. So, lastly, to sum it all up, I'll ask you viewers, how do you see this whole situation? Think and tell us in the comment section below. Also, thank you for staying with us. We'll keep you updated with all the big stories from the day.